All right, I think we can get started if everyone is ready.
I believe we are.
Okay, great. Um, Good afternoon. I would like to call this public hearing to order. I am Tiara Hughes. I am a member of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, and I will serve as the hearing officer for today's hearing. With me today are Michael Gaynor, Assistant Corporation Counselor Supervisor of the Real Estate and Land Use Division of the city's Law Department, who is Commission's counsel for today's public hearing. Indiana Cavallo, Historic Preservation Division of the Department of Planning and Development. This hearing will be conducted per the emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public hearings issued by the chairman of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks of the City of Chicago in accordance with the chairman's emergency rulemaking powers pursuant to that certain rule adopted by the Commission pursuant to a resolution at the Commission's regular meeting on July 4th, 2020. The emergency rule resolution can be found at www.chicago.gov/ccl. These emergency rules governing the conduct of remote public hearings on landmark designations were effective as of July 7th, 2021, and shall remain in effect until there is no longer a disaster proclamation issued by the governor of the state of Illinois or the director of the Illinois Department of Public Health relating to public health concerns for Cook County. At such time, these emergency rules shall be repealed of their own accord. The chairman may rescind, suspend, or amend these emergency rules as circumstances dictate. During the period of emergency rules are in effect, they supersede any conflicting rules and regulations regarding the conduct of public hearings on the designations under Section 2-120-680 of the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance, as such rules and regulations are set forth in the Commission's rules, including but not limited to Article 2 of the regular rules. The purpose of these emergency rules is to permit the Commission to conduct public hearings on landmark designations under Section 2-120-680 of the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance, while taking appropriate measures consistent with the guidance of the City Council, the Governor, the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the Chicago Department of Public Health to mitigate the contagion and spread of the COVID-19 virus. These emergency rules address the manner in which the Commission will conduct public hearings on the landmark designations under Section 2-120-680 of the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance to comply with recommended social distancing and social isolation practices to mitigate contagion and promote the public health and well-being of the general public, Commission staff, and members of the Commission. I will now summarize the nature of today's hearing. The Commission of Chicago Landmarks was established and is governed by the Municipal Code of Chicago. The procedures of today's public hearing are contained in Article 2 of the Commission's Rules and Regulations governing public hearings on landmark designations. The purpose and duties of the Commission are set forth in the Municipal Code and include the identification, preservation, protection, enhancement, and encouragement of all the continued utilization and rehabilitation of such areas, districts, places, buildings, structures, works of arts, and other objects having a special historic, community, architectural, or aesthetic interest or value of the City of Chicago and its citizens. The Commission carries out this mandate by recommending to the City Council that specific areas, districts, places, buildings, structures, works of art, and other objects to be designated as official Chicago landmarks. The Commission bases its recommendations on 7 criteria set forth in Section 2-120-620 of the Municipal Code, and the integrity criterion set forth in Section 2-120-630 of the Municipal Code. The purpose of today's hearing is for the Commission to receive relevant facts and information to assist the Commission with deciding whether to recommend the Halsted-Willow Group, whether to recommend that the Halsted-Willow Group meets the criteria set forth in the section, and that is Section 2-120-620. The format of the hearing will be as follows. First, Diana Cavallo, Head of Historic Preservation Division for the Department of Planning and Development, will review the chronological order of events related to the proposed designation that have led to today's hearing. Then I will rule on any requests for the party status to the hearing by property owners, as well as other individuals or organizations. After that, the Commission staff will make a presentation summarizing the preliminary landmark recommendation and preliminary summary of information for the proposed designation of the Halsted-Willow Group. After the staff's presentation, property owners or their individuals who have been granted property status will have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff. Then those granted party status by me will be able to make presentations regarding the proposed landmark designation. Lastly, any members of the public who wish to make brief statements concerning the proposed landmark designation may do so. All of the property owners or their respectives have the right to make a statement for or against the proposed designation. They also have the right to ask questions of the Commission staff after completion of the presentation by the staff. The Landmarks Ordinance also allows property owners and their individuals and organizations to request status as a party to the hearing. Parties to the hearing's proceedings can make longer and more detailed presentations for or against the proposed landmark designation that can include submitting photographs and other documents, as well as presenting testimony from their own witnesses. Parties may also question any other party's witnesses and question the Commission staff who summarized the preliminary landmark recommendation. Only those who want to make a more detailed presentation beyond the statement or question need to request party status. I want to note finally that the Commission's rules and regulations strictly limit presentations at the landmark designation public hearing to information solely relevant to whether or not the proposed designation meets criteria for the Chicago landmark designation. In accordance with the Commission's rules and regulations, information relating to zoning, permit applications, the building code, or potential economic impacts is not to be heard or entertained during these proceedings. Chronological order of events and incorporation of events will now begin. Now I will ask Diana Cavallo to outline the chronological order of events related to the proposed landmark designation of the Halsted-Willow Group that have led up to the public hearing and incorporation of the Commission's documents that are relevant to the proposed designation into the record.
Thank you, Commissioner. In 2013, Landmarks Illinois embarked on a collaborative multi-year advocacy effort to protect the 4 buildings that comprise the Halsted-Willow Group, located at 1726 to 1808 North Halsted Street, 1727 to 1733 North Halsted, 745 to 813 West Willow, and 800 to 812 West Willow. With help from Landmarks Illinois, the Ranch Triangle Association and Lincoln Central Association funded the preparation of a draft landmark designation report for the group in 2018, written by architectural historian Terry Tatum. At its regular meeting of December 3rd, 2020, the Commission on Chicago Landmarks approved a preliminary landmark recommendation for designation of the group as a Chicago landmark. A courtesy letter from DPD to the owners in the group announcing this meeting was sent on November 6, 2020, and is identified as Commission Document 1. The commission found that the group appeared to meet 3 of the 7 criteria for designation, as well as the integrity criterion identified in the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance. The preliminary recommendation, identified as Commission Document 2, initiated the consideration process for further study and analysis of the possible landmark designation for the group. As part of the preliminary recommendation, the commission preliminarily identified the significant historical and architectural features of the group as all exterior elevations, including roof lines, of the buildings visible from the public rights-of-way. As part of the preliminary recommendation, the commission also adopted a preliminary summary of information dated December 3, 2020, and identified as Commission Document 3. In a letter dated December 17, 2020, identified as Commission Document 4, the Department of Planning and Development, on behalf of the commission, notified the owners of property within the group of the preliminary recommendation. At its regular meeting of January 7, 2021, the commission received a report identified as Commission Document 5 from Maurice Cox, Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Development, stating that the proposed landmark designation of the group supports the city's overall planning goals and is consistent with the city's governing policies and plans. In a letter dated February 4, 2021, the commission officially requested the consent to the proposed landmark designation from the owners of property within the group. A copy of the letter, which requested the return of an enclosed written consent form indicating consent or non-consent by March 22nd, 2021, is identified as Commission Document 6. At the end of the request for consent period, commission staff had received forms consenting to the landmark designation from 2 of the 4 property owners within the group, which are attached as Commission Document 7. The remaining 2 property owners did not return consent forms. Without written consents from all of the property owners, Section 2-120-650 of the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance requires the commission to hold a public hearing on the preliminary recommendation with respect to the designation of the group as a Chicago landmark. With respect to the 2 owners who did not respond to the commission's request for consent, it should be noted that staff made themselves available to these owners to discuss the designation at multiple times before and during the designation process. Specifically, staff met with a representative of the owner of 1727 to 1729 North Halsted Street via virtual meetings held on November 19, 2020, and January 4, 2021, to discuss the proposed designation and its effects. Staff received an email from the owner's representative of 1727 to 29 North Halsted Street on February 23, 2021, indicating that the owner would not consent to the designation. Staff also made themselves available to the owner of 1733 North Halsted Street to discuss the designation and its effects. The owner of 1733 North Halsted Street indicated their opposition to the designation with staff on a phone call on January 8, 2021. In a letter dated June 17, 2021, identified as Commission Document 8, the commission notified the owners of the properties within the group of the public hearing being held today. A notice of the hearing date was also posted on 3 signs in the public right-of-way within the group, as evidenced by an affidavit signed by commission staff member Daniel Kleiber, confirming such, identified as Commission Document 9. In addition, the public hearing date and time, as well as the virtual manner of the meeting, was published as a legal notice in the Chicago Tribune. A certificate from the Chicago Tribune attesting to the publication on June 23, 2021 of the legal notice for today's public hearing date is identified as Commission Document 10. The public hearing date, time, and virtual manner were also posted on the Department of Planning and Development's website. Copies of photographs and text used in the Commission staff's presentation at today's hearing are identified as Commission Document 11. And finally, correspondence received by the Commission pertaining to the proposed designation is identified as Commission Document 12. That concludes the chronology. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. I would like to incorporate these documents of the Commission into the record. The Commission's documents are available for inspection via email request. And now transitioning into parties who are owners and owners' representatives. Thank you guys again. In a moment, I will rule on requests to become a party at today's hearing. I will first review requests from party owners and their representatives wishing to present themselves as parties at the hearing. To reiterate, if the owner of a property within the Halsted-Willow group being considered for landmark designation or their representative only wishes to make a statement for or against the proposed landmark designation, he or she does not have to declare themselves a party. A property owner may still make a verbal statement during the public statement portion of the hearing or after presentations by any parties, or may present a written statement for the record. The property owner still retains the right to ask questions of the Commission staff and its experts at the conclusion of their presentation summarizing the preliminary landmark recommendation. However, the Commission's rules and regulations do give the owner of the property within the proposed Halsted-Willow group a right to be a party to the hearing. If they declare themselves a party, they can participate in the hearing beyond the means I just noted by also making a presentation for or against the proposed landmark designation. In addition to an oral or written statement, such presentations may include documents, photographs, and/or testimony from witnesses about whether the property meets landmark criteria. A party's witnesses may be questioned about their presentations by any other party, Commission staff, and the public hearing officer. That said, those wishing to request party status were required to file an appearance form 48 hours prior to the public hearing. I received one appearance form requesting party status, and I've decided to grant that one individual party status. And now transitioning into parties who are not property owners. The Landmarks Ordinance also allows that certain other persons, organizations, or legal entities may become parties to this proceeding. If you are an interested individual or a representative of an organization and simply want to make a verbal or written statement for or against the proposed designation, you may do so without asking to be named a party at the hearing. You would simply make your statement during the public hearing portion of the hearing. However, the Chicago Landmarks Ordinance states that persons, organization, or other legal entity whose use of employment or whose members' use of employment of the property proposed for designation may be injured by either the designation of the property or the failure to recommend designation may become a party to the designation hearing. In addition to persons, organizations, and other legal entities residing in, leasing, or having any ownership interest in the real property located within 500 feet of the boundary line of the proposed Halsted-Willow group may become a party. Again, the Commission's rules and regulations provides the same rights and obligations to the qualified interested party as to does the property owner who has declared themselves a party. Parties can make presentations for or against the proposed landmark designation, which may include not just oral or written statement, but also documents, photographs, and/or testimony from witnesses as to whether or not the property meets landmark criteria. Let the record reflect that there were no additional parties who wish to become recognized as parties to this hearing. And now transitioning, next, we will hear from a presentation by commission staff summarizing preliminary landmark recommendation for the proposed Halsted-Willow group. Daniel Kleiber and Matt Crawford are the commission staff and are with us today. Daniel, would you like to make the presentation now?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Commissioner. Let me pull it up 1 second. Can you see it okay?
Yep, we're good.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. Dan Kleiber with the Department of Planning and Development. I'm here today with an overview of the preliminary recommendation approved by the Landmarks Commission in December 2020 for the landmark designation of the Halsted-Willow group of 4 buildings located at approximately 1800 North Halsted Street. Similar to what was indicated in December, I would like to say that we are referring to this proposed collection of buildings as a group versus a district, but this is not the first time that the Commission has used this nomenclature. The City of Chicago has several such groups already designated, including the Lake Franklin Group, as well as the Gage Group of buildings on Michigan Avenue, both in the Loop. In addition, it should be noted that this proposed landmark designation was, and very much still is, a community-driven effort that has been in the works for years and has involved the Lincoln Central Association, Ranch Triangle Association, Landmarks Illinois, and countless other individual residents and stakeholders, as well as Alderman Smith and Alderman Hopkins. To help orient you overall, the subject buildings are located in the Lincoln Park community area, approximately 3 miles northwest of the Central Business District. To give you a little context within Lincoln Park itself, you can see that the proposed designation is located within the southwesternmost portion of Lincoln Park, as represented by the red star at the intersection of North Halsted Street and West Willow Street. Nearby designated Chicago landmarks include the Halsted Armitage District 2 full blocks to the north, as well as the Jandorf Building on North Avenue to the south, and Mulligan School a few blocks to the west. Now I'd like to provide a detailed look at the context surrounding this group of buildings at this intersection. Again, there are 4 buildings in the proposed group. In no particular order, the first is 1800 North Halsted, which is located in the upper photo at the far left of the screen, which is the northwest corner of the intersection. This building is actually part of a large planned development, which includes a 1970s era redevelopment project on Halsted, as well as a block to the west, Dayton. As you can see, the buildings to the north of it include a wide variety of generally newer infill development from the past few decades. For your information, this building is located in the 43rd Ward, Alderman Smith's ward. The second building is 1732 North Halsted Street, which is located in the photo at the top of your screen on the far right, which is the southwest corner of the intersection. As you can see, the buildings to the south of it are also generally much newer construction infill development from the last few decades. Lastly, this building is located also in the 43rd Ward. Now this next slide contains both buildings 3 and 4, which are 1733 North Halsted at the southeast corner of the intersection and 1727 through 29 North Halsted immediately adjacent to the south. In this view, which is looking north on Halsted, the 2 subject buildings are located at the far left of the photo on the top of the screen. To the south of these buildings, to the right in the image, is a vintage residential building set back from the street and much more modern development to the right of that. This side of the street is located within the 2nd Ward, Alderman Hopkins' ward. Putting it all together, the group of 4 buildings are outlined in red on the map before you. In a nutshell, each of the 4 mixed-use buildings, all originally with ground floor commercial uses and upper floor residential uses, date from the 1880s and form a rare grouping of such buildings that have served as a highly localized node of activity for nearly 140 years. To that end, the Commission found that the Halsted-Willow group of buildings met 3 criteria for Chicago landmark designation preliminarily, including Criterion 1 for heritage. The Halsted-Willow group is a significant group of 19th century mixed-use buildings. exemplifying the historic and architectural importance of such buildings to the economic and social history of Chicago. The buildings in the group were built in the 1880s, a period of great growth for Chicago in general and the Lincoln Park community area in particular. They remain an important link to Chicago's economic and social history for both Chicago residents and visitors. The buildings in the Halsted-Willow group were built and used by ethnic German immigrants and their descendants through the late 19th and early 20th centuries, exemplifying the historic importance of Germans to Chicago and its neighborhoods. In addition, it should be noted that over the early decades, collectively, the buildings housed several commercial enterprises that served the area, including a butcher, various saloons, a grocer, drugstore, and a public hall. Most notably, the 1800 North Halsted building was the home of Schulien's, a German tavern restaurant that was a beehive of activity and became even more famous for Matt Schulien's magic shows. Mr. Schulien, depicted above, was described in the day by the Chicago Tribune as a brilliant manipulator of cards. He is seen in the photo on the right performing his card-on-the-wall trick, where he would throw a deck of cards onto a wall, and the only one left on the wall at the end would be the one that the customer had picked. The commission also found that the grouping meets criterion 4 for exemplary architecture. The Halsted-Willow Group is a significant group of Victorian-era store and flats buildings, exemplifying the importance of this commercial building type. One building also historically housed a third-floor public hall, a type of meeting hall of significance to Chicago's working and middle-class neighborhoods. The buildings in the Halsted-Willow Group are fine and significant examples of neighborhood mixed-use buildings in the Italianate and Queen Anne architectural styles, both significant styles to the history of Chicago architecture and characteristic of the city's 19th century architecture. Moreover, the buildings in the group are finely constructed and ornamented with brick, stone, terracotta, and pressed metal, exemplifying the best of late 19th century craftsmanship and use of building materials. The commission also found that the grouping meets criterion 6 for its association with a theme. The Halsted-Willow Group's buildings display a distinct visual unity based on a consistent scale and size, building setbacks, overall design, use of building materials, and detailing. The buildings of the group form an informal gateway to the residential neighborhoods east and west of Halsted due to their location, distinctive appearance, and handsome design. In addition to the landmark criteria just discussed, the commission found that the group also meets the separate integrity criterion. Overall, the Halsted-Willow Group has excellent historic integrity, as is represented by this vintage and current photo of 1800 North Halsted. The group's buildings retain their original sites, overall building forms, and character-defining exterior details. They retain historic window patterns and openings, as well as ornamental brickwork, terracotta, and pressed metal. Change is an inevitable condition of commercial buildings that thrive over many decades, and the buildings in the Halsted-Willow Group have had architectural changes made over time. Common changes include storefront alterations, especially store window sash, and changes in store and upper floor entrances. However, most of the buildings in the group appear to have retained historic storefront framing elements, including columns, piers, and lintels. Another common change is window sash replacement. Windows in all 4 buildings appear to have been replaced over time. However, the most common current sash configuration, 1/1 double hung, is most likely identical to the historic sash configuration in all 4 buildings. Therefore, and in conclusion, the commission found preliminarily that the significant historical and architectural features of the Halsted-Willow Group be identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the buildings in the group, as seen from public rights of way. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Daniel, for such a thorough presentation. That concludes the staff presentation. Now we will take questions for the commission staff. I want to reiterate that any property owner, whether a party to the hearing or not, and any other party may ask questions of the staff. Questions must relate to whether the proposed designation meets the criteria set forth in Section 2-120-620 in the Municipal Code. Does anyone signed up to speak have any questions for the staff? If yes, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, I'm checking now. I don't see any hands raised. Let the record reflect that there were no additional parties who wish to ask questions at this time. And now we will have presentations by parties to whom I've granted party status. We will begin with presentations by parties in support of the proposed designation. Parties may include an oral or written statement, documents, photos, and or testimony from witnesses. Presentations should be no longer than 20 minutes and must be limited to whether the proposed designation meets the landmark criteria set forth in Section 2-120-620 of the Municipal Code. Information ruled by the hearing officer is not relevant to whether the property meets landmark criteria and may not be entered in the public hearing record. Also, to the extent any presentations include testimony from witnesses, any other parties to the hearing, the commission staff, and the hearing officer may question the witnesses as well. Now we'll hear presentations from those parties in support of the landmark designation.
Commissioner Hughes, this is Dan Kleiber. We do not have any parties that are in support of the landmark designation, so I think we can move on to the next section.
Move on to opposition. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, so transitioning here to opposition, we will now hear from parties in opposition of the proposed designation. Parties may include an oral or written presentation, documents, photos, or testimony from witnesses. Presentation should not be longer than 20 minutes and must be limited to whether or not the proposed designation meets the landmark criteria. And I guess I should keep going and just repeat what I said before. That criteria is set forth in Section 2-120-620 of the Municipal Code. Information ruled by the hearing officer as not relevant to whether the property meets landmark criteria may not be entered into the public hearing record. Also, to the extent any presentations include testimony from witnesses, any other parties to the hearing, commission staff, and hearing officer may question the presenter providing that testimony. Now we'll hear from the parties in opposition of the designation. I would like to call for Bernard Citron, representing the owner of 1727 through 1729 North Halsted Street.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes, other members, and anybody present here today. Again, my name is Bernard Citron. I'm with the law firm of Thompson Colbert, and I represent the owner of the property at 1727-29 North Halsted. Our position in opposition is really very brief and is directed at a couple of issues with this matter. One, we do not understand why a 4-building grouping of these buildings could not be dealt with on an individual building basis as opposed to improperly being considered a district. And our reason for this is really to address the current condition and therefore what will be the future issues with our building. By including our building in as a group, you cannot designate specific aspects of our building, and instead the entire building is addressed as part of the landmark designation as a group. And specifically, we have an issue with the statement that was just made by Mr. Kleiber as to the elevations that are dealt with. The only elevation of any importance of this building is actually the front elevation along Halsted. And that elevation has significantly been changed by virtue of the ground floor windows. The ground floor windows and storefront have nothing to do with the historic nature of that elevation. It was significantly changed many years ago to a much more modern elevation. Yet by virtue of including this building as part of a group, instead of being dealt with as an individual landmark, it doesn't, the designation by the city doesn't take that into account at all. And it is without question, you can look at the photos that are in front of you, that first floor elevation is significantly different than the remainder of that elevation on the upper levels. Yet it will exist that way, but if it ever needs to be replaced, or if the owner seeks to modify it, we are now subject to the landmark standards, which is an extreme hardship to this building. That is a commercial elevation, that is a commercial use. And those businesses are only getting worse in terms of our ability to fill those spaces. Yet we will be classified as a landmark and probably have to bring that portion of the elevation back to the landmark designation. And I did speak with staff, and they were very, in a sense, helpful in talking to me, but had no answers to that. The other portion of what Mr. Klaber said that is more bothersome is it applies to any elevation visible from the public way. Our south elevation has nothing to do with the landmark standards of the City of Chicago ordinance. It was changed many, many years ago. It in fact is much more modern in terms of the windows, in terms of the stairways, in terms of the balconies and everything else pertaining to that southern elevation. Yet by inclusion in a landmark district, there is no possibility of this commission to participate in the drafting of a landmark ordinance that would very specifically take out that elevation from the landmark designation. So what you are doing here is you are designating the entire building as part of the district, yet there is at least a significant portion of the front Halsted elevation that long ago was changed to a design that is not in conformance with the remainder of the building. And probably even more importantly, you are including that south elevation, which bears no relationship to the remainder of the building. Now, the staff tried to comfort me by saying, well, that is a secondary elevation, yet nothing in the south elevation, yet nothing in the district designation points that out. And our concern is both specific to this building and both based on the fact that we just, on behalf of another client, went through a situation where the community organizations didn't like the development potential of the building and chose to use the landmark designation as a way to stop a development. This happens all the time. The commission and its staff is well aware that the designation, the landmark designations, are used not just to preserve a building, but to stop a future development. We have nothing more to say other than we do believe that for these reasons, the inclusion of this building in a district, as opposed to this commission addressing the 4 buildings individually as landmarks, should be the more appropriate way. This isn't 100 buildings in a district or 25 buildings in a district. This is 4 buildings. 2 of the buildings have, by virtue of their legal requirement, supported the landmarking of their buildings either as individual landmarks or as being included in a district. Our building will suffer in the future because of its inclusion in a district, whereby if it was approached as a landmark designation of the building itself, we would have the opportunity to better address these two elevations, being the first floor elevation on Halsted and the south elevation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I guess I do want to ask the staff at this moment, because I do believe, Mr. Citron, that in the future, when alterations, for instance, are proposed to a landmark, whether it's a part of a group, district, or individually, it still is a case-by-case basis. And for your particular property that you're representing, it will still be, compared to whatever we consider the designation today. So it's, whether it's individually or within the group, I think you in the future will still be able to bring your property back individually for the permit review committee to rule on any alterations or updates you guys want to make to the property, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to pose that question to the staff and hear some responses here on the future processes.
Commissioner, if I might just respond to that specifically. So you're correct. Each permit application is reviewed as it is submitted to the department. And for substantial amount of work, staff is authorized to review it based on the standards. Certain types of work certainly do require permit review committee, and we do base the recommendations to the committee based on the circumstances of each project, and we do acknowledge the standards and as well as to how we evaluate changes to elevations that are primary elevations versus secondary elevations where more changes are appropriate.
Yeah, I think that addresses some of your testimony about it being a group versus an individual and the primary versus the secondary. There's plenty of times where it's not denoted, and I don't know if it's ever been denoted in the designation where they talk about primary versus secondary surfaces or elevations to the property. But once the property comes back, it is in fact a case-by-case basis, and your primary elevation will not be treated the same as your secondary elevations if you wish to present it that way. But with that, I want to thank you for your presentation. And do any other parties of the hearing or the commission staff have any questions for this party? If yes, you can raise your hand virtually. Okay, I think we have no questions in the queue. So with that here, I'll transition into statements by property owners and members of the general public. Statements may be made in favor or in opposition of the proposed landmark designation. Per the emergency rules, anyone wishing to make a statement regarding the proposed designation must have submitted their appearance forms via email no later than 48 hours prior to the commencement of the public hearing. Statements from members of the general public are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address and the person or organization you wish to represent if applicable. In the interest of time, you are encouraged to focus your statements on the information not previously given. The commission also accepts written comment on the subject of the public hearing from members of the public up to 24 hours prior to the scheduled commencement of the public hearing. Any written comments received have been posted on the commission's website and will be deemed incorporated into the public record. Statements in favor of the designation. First, we will hear statements from individuals in favor of the proposed landmark designation. We have received 5 requests to speak from individuals in favor of the designation. One of the requests to speak came within the past 48 hours deadlines, but I, as the hearing officer for today's hearing, will like to allow that individual the ability to speak. First, can we please hear from Lisa DeCure? Lisa?
Lisa was, this is Dan Kleiber. Lisa was going to be joining by phone.
Yeah, I am here. I am here,
okay,
Dan.
good.
Can you
Sorry.
hear me now?
Sorry.
Yes, we can hear
Sorry,
you.
the star 6 took a little pause time to unmute me, so sorry for that. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. This is Lisa DeCure, Director of Advocacy from Landmarks, Illinois. As was stated earlier in the staff presentation, Landmarks, Illinois included this grouping of buildings on our most endangered historic places in Illinois list in 2014 because of its largely intact late 19th century characteristics and the fact that miraculously this group of 4 1880s buildings on very prominent corners in a very development heavy pressured area of Lincoln Park not only has survived urban renewal of the 1960s and the 70s, but subsequently the large-scale development project that had threatened this visually cohesive commercial intersection at that time in 2014. While 1800 North Halsted is the best known of the grouping from 2 longtime businesses located there, the Black Duck Restaurant as well as Schulian's Tavern, all of the buildings in the proposed designation have exceptional architectural integrity and craftsmanship that could not be replicated today. And we want to address the fact that all of these buildings meet criteria. So as was outlined, the buildings meet criterion 1 for heritage, 4 for architectural type, and 6 for theme, and all have excellent integrity. In addressing Mr. Citron's comments, I also want to make the point that despite the storefront changes at 1727-29, the original opening of the storefront at the street level of that building is still intact. And the type of changes that were made to that storefront are very common and do not take away from its historic integrity or interpretation in any way. The south facade is viewed by not only staff, but groups like ours as indeed as well secondary. It's not the secondary, that facade is not even pictured in the designation report. And so again, as staff has made clear, will always be viewed in a very different way from a design review perspective than the front Halsted facade. We really are very excited to see this designation finally come forward. These buildings are survivors, and as survivors, they deserve this protection. Their owners are to be commended for their long-time investment and care of these buildings, and we really appreciate their long-time ownership and their willingness to retain these buildings as an important visual gateway for the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. DeCure, for your comments. Now, can we please hear from Ms. Graziano?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good enough. I truly appreciate what Lisa just said because I can take that out of what I was going to talk about. But my perspective is a little bit different. As an ethnographer, I look into not only the worthiness of the buildings, but the worthiness of the stories behind the buildings. A community is more than its buildings. Communities consist of the people, the spaces they live and work in, and most importantly, communities consist of relationships and stories. Stories about the people, about their lives, and the stories surrounding their buildings. These 4 buildings are very rich in story. With Terry Tatum's research, you have documentation of the absolute integrity of the Halsted-Willow Group and the stories of these buildings. Such stories connect us with our past and reflect our commitment to honoring the past and embracing the future and our future generations. To lose buildings of historic significance denies us a potential that is far-reaching, for it denies us the actual buildings and the many origin stories that accompany those buildings. Over the past decade, neighborhood associations, Lincoln Central, Ranch, Sheffield, Mid-North, Old Town, as well as Landmarks Illinois and Preservation Chicago, have documented our concerns and fears of losing our historic heritage to the loss of the Halsted-Willow Group. We are no longer protected being in an historic district. We understand the critical need to speak up and protest to protect the buildings that hold our history and our stories. We have been blessed by the insight of a group of special people I feel who are close to being the godfathers to this project. John Tully, Terry Tatum, and Bob Siegel. John Tully's original research, Terry Tatum's exacting demands on what we needed to do in order to protect our heritage, Bob Siegel and his beautiful photographs and intensive research into the Halsted-Willow Gateway cannot be overestimated. Both Bob and Terry have passed, but their legacies remain within this landmark effort. Ranch Triangle, especially Diane Levin and Chuck Griffin, and Lincoln Central leaders worked in close collaboration with Terry, John, and Bob in documenting the worthiness of these buildings. I only hope when these buildings are landmarked, a fate I pray for, these advocates will be honored and become part of the story behind this grouping of buildings. I understand owners on the east side of Halsted oppose landmarking. I can quote numerous studies which document landmarking does not limit or diminish land values. In many instances, landmarking protects and escalates property values as well as protects the property itself. We've reached out to these owners over the years. American individualism and the rights of property owners are intrinsic to the American way, but we have learned over time that our history, our stories, and our historic buildings are beyond monetary valuation. Property at Lincoln Park will maintain and exceed property values over the majority of Chicago neighborhoods. This is a gift that we have living in Lincoln Park. The landlords will.
Thank you so much, Ms. Graziano. And now we will hear from Ms. Diane Levin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. My name is Diane Levin, longtime homeowner at 1929 North Bissell, former board member of Ranch Triangle Community Association, former ranch planning chair, and a founding member of the Armitage-Halsted Landmark District Committee. Today is a chance to again cement the years-long effort of so many residents, present and past, and guarantee a legacy for our residents to come. We can also honor iconic figures like real estate giant John Baird, as well as countless pillars of the community, someone I'm going to talk about today, like Dan O'Donnell. These are typical of so many people who understood and dug in deep in commitment to their community. One of these men initiated the efforts of preservation. The other fought vigorously against landmarking, and finally wholeheartedly embraced the protection of his multiple buildings that he'd owned for decades. The seeds of preserving this corner were sown by John Baird, a member of the Chicago Landmarks Commission for over 40 years. Baird's vision for the DePaul area demanded that the character of the community survive, even as he fueled its physical redevelopment. He led the transformation, but he preserved structures like those at the intersection of Halsted and Willow, because Mr. Baird knew architectural identity would be essential to the enduring popularity of the DePaul area. Dan O'Donnell spent his entire adult life as a local business owner and a protector of so many buildings along Armitage Avenue. He owned commercial storefronts and large multiple apartment buildings in what is now today the Armitage Halsted Landmark District. When the Armitage Landmark District was proposed, Dan vigorously testified against it. He flyered the area, he wrote letters, and he rallied other commercial building owners against it. That was 18 years ago. This winter, Dan unexpectedly died. And this past weekend, Alderman Smith unveiled his namesake street sign. Over the years, Dan told me more than once he was glad that the street had been landmarked. He came to believe that his independent stewardship would not survive, and the area would ultimately be ravaged by teardowns and prey to unsympathetic development. These are just two people who understood that for urban communities to thrive, they must continue to attract the investment and the commitment of future residents who would be drawn to Chicago's recognizable, established, historical neighborhoods. Preserving a sense of place is a way to protect our collective investment, not limit it. I'm no expert, but I can't think of any example in any other world-class city where efforts to preserve architectural heritage have ever been viewed as a mistake. On the contrary, the wisdom of preservation gains appreciation and widening acceptance as time goes on. The Halsted-Willow group will only grow in importance and value, and I urge the Commission to continue its support of its creation. Thank you so much for the chance to speak.
Thank you so much, Ms. Levin. And now we would like to hear from Alderman Hopkins.
Tiara, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So Alderman Hopkins was not able to make it. I have been asked to just quickly give a word of support on his behalf. My name is Brian Pelrine for the record, and I'm on his staff. And he does support this measure. He appreciates the value that this landmark grouping would bring to the community. And beyond that, I do not have much to add other than what our speakers have said. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please let the record reflect that Alderman Hopkins is in support. And with that, we would like to hear from Alderman Smith. I think you're on mute, Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And what we hope will be a wonderful outcome. People in our community are very passionate about maintaining the beauty, the historic significance, and the value of Lincoln Park. We are blessed with having, over the years, having various neighborhood groups realize that the architecture does, as Deirdre said, stands in for the people and stories who built neighborhoods. And we're so glad that this spirit is spreading throughout the whole city. With house museums and other architectural landmarks across the city. Was very thrilled to support that effort. What's really unusual, this is that the historic preservation of this area began in 1978, when John Baird decided to help renovate and bring in new housing to Lincoln Park. And he realized, as Diane Levin said, John Baird of Baird and Warner, that's the actual Baird. The beginning of that real estate firm was him. And he said, you know, I can put in some modern townhouses here, but people really appreciate the character of this neighborhood. So I'm going to keep these buildings on corners. And today they are very successful. These are landmark restaurants and places that people enjoy in our neighborhood. Vinci Restaurant, which is a very intact building, is very successful. The Willow Room is now very successful. 1727 to 29 that Mr. Citron spoke about is the home of Boca Restaurants, one of the finest restaurants in the city of Chicago, whose owners love the location and that it is housed in such a building. And the corner is a neighborhood place, a pizza place that we've all gone to for years and years and years. So these are buildings that have thrived as historic buildings, and that is why they need to be preserved. The first threat to this area came in 2013 when a developer came to my office and said, hey, we think that the corner of Will and Halsted would be much better as a lot of apartments and possibly even big box retail. We ought to take all of North Avenue retail and bring it up the street. And that is how we recognize that things were really changing and in trouble. These are the gateway. These buildings are, in fact, one of the gateways to our entire community. And it spreads throughout, as the historic buildings do throughout the area. And so that's why it's a really, really important thing. We could put a big sign over it across Halsted and says, welcome to Lincoln Park. But that's nothing that we're ever going to do. We want to maintain the beauty of the area, and that you can tell when you're here by the historic storefronts with apartments above and wonderful amenities for the community, and a recognition that all of us came from someplace else. One small fact that I don't know if you highlighted in the report is that this has been a hallmark of the changing demographics of our area. While undoubtedly this was a German neighborhood back in the day when the Germans were the first immigrants to come to Chicago, because they pretty much, other than just westward ho, German immigration was really prominent in the mid to late 1800s. You know, it's also been the home of so much other immigration, and that social hall was what we understand to be the first place in Chicago of a Muslim meeting hall. Now, it was a Bosnian Muslim meeting hall, but that's really remarkable and should be celebrated. So I'll just say that because the preservation of these communities, of these particular buildings, really started 40 years ago, I think it's time to make it official. And so we really are grateful to the Landmark staff who worked on this, grateful to Alderman Hopkins' office who participated, and really grateful to the many neighbors, some of whom have passed, and some of which are here, and there's many more who have supported this, this landmarking. So thank you very much, and we really, really appreciate this hearing today.
Thank you so much for your comments, Alderman Smith. Let the record reflect that Alderman Smith is undoubtedly in support. We have not received any requests to speak against the designation, so this concludes the public comment portion of the designation. With that, this concludes today's public hearing. The commission will consider the entire record, including the transcript of today's public hearing at its regular meeting on August 5th, 2021, and determine whether to make the final recommendation to City Hall on the proposed landmark designation of the Halsted-Willow Group. The August 5th meeting of the Commission on Chicago Landmarks is anticipated to take place in person. At this time, we are determining whether room 201-A will be available and appropriate for the commission meeting. However, the confirmed location will be included in the final notice posted on August 3rd, 2021 on the commission's website at www.chicago.gov/CCL. Thank you all very much. And with that, I will call the meeting officially adjourned.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Have a good afternoon.